This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth with breaking news today. The location for the 67th annual Bilderberg conference has just been revealed. It's going to be held at the Fairmont Hotel in Switzerland, and we're just finding out about this 2 days before the event. So to say this is very last minute is a bit of an understatement. Back in the day, we used to find out about these things a little bit sooner, largely because of guys like the late, great Jim Tucker, who unfortunately is no longer with us today. But someone who is still with us and someone who is an equal champion when it comes to exposing Bilderberg is my next guest, and he's joining us on the line. We have Aaron Dykes of Truthstream Media. Aaron, thank you so much for taking some time to help us break this one down today. So much to unpack here. We have the participants list revealed. We have the agenda list revealed, and I want to get into this in detail. But before we do, maybe you can address this whole new thing they're doing by being a little bit more secretive, it seems, and holding off till the very last minute to announce where and when this is going to be. Why do you think they switched it up this year and are being even more secretive with their dates and locations?
Well, I can only speculate, and thanks for having me on, Dan. You've really made Bilderberg your issue, and I've tried to make it mine also and study the list as much as I can. And, you know, it's typical to get the participants and the topics a couple days ahead or even the day of the conference, but for the location and the dates to not come out at least several weeks in advance, if not typically a couple months, since I've been covering it since 2006, is different. It's unprecedented for the time that I've been covering it. I understand they were probably a little more secretive in the decades past, but again, as you mentioned, Jim Tucker, kind of an old-fashioned investigative journalist with sources in the DC area and that kind of thing, was able to track it down. And, I know that I forget the name of your fellow reporter. I know she tried to track it down, and I guess we're going to have to do more homework because they're clearly acting very sly and very secretive. And they are, in all reality, very secretive and very powerful people, and probably not to be completely messed with. And so, of course, they have tricks up their sleeves, and they've got access to everything that's going on in this world. So they can spin a press release just as well as any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And they just finally put this thing out, and it's pretty revealing, I should say, on some of these topics on the agenda. A few of them kind of stand out for me. Maybe we could jump right into that. Let's just take a quick look. Some of the topics this year are a stable strategic order. Now that there's a lot to unpack in that
Wide
one
open.
that one little sentence right there. There's a lot we can cover on that. We'll get back to it. We got what's next for Europe, which can probably kind of coincide with the Brexit topic. We have climate change and sustainability. China and Russia are often on the agenda. The future of capitalism, Brexit, the ethics of artificial intelligence, which I found quite interesting. Also, the weaponization of social media. It's a pretty big one. The importance of space, and finally, cyber threats. So, Aaron, when you first saw the agenda list, was there anything in particular that popped out as being particularly peculiar to you?
It seems like there's always one in particular that is meant to be, in my opinion, a double message. And of course, that would be the weaponization of social media for this year. In past years, things like the end of privacy, or does privacy exist? I think it actually was. Really seemed like a double-edged kind of hint of the things to come. And the weaponization of social media, they continue this narrative that the so-called far right are just manipulating every social media. I recently read an article. I don't have the exact specifications, but I think it's a narrative that's gotten around that there are secret groups on Facebook and elsewhere that posed as regular, typical, ordinary groups for years, and then suddenly threw the switches and became far-right groups and influenced millions of voters with disinformation and misinformation and swung elections. And that's why we saw what happened just in the last few days in the UK, in Italy, other parts of Europe, with Brexit, the Brexit Party in particular, really having significant and somewhat unexpected gains, having Theresa May step down, having a continued swing of the pendulum in Italy, and just populism everywhere in Europe, and to a large extent here in the U.S. As far as, people caught up in the left-right paradigm, supporting Trump, what have you. So that's kind of how they're framing it. What I'm seeing is people I know being shut down. I'm seeing words that I can't say online. I'm seeing a real throttling of the ability to reach people compared with what my own personal platform have been able to do just months and weeks ago. And really a very terrifying or extremely Orwellian, literally Orwellian future just ahead unless things turn around. So the weaponization of social media has become perhaps their ace card. I mean, so much of the economy and all of our communications have moved online. I mean, person to person really has taken a back seat in every way, as has brick and mortar. And this is a trend I've seen specifically since 2011 at Bilderberg, when they had a confab of all the major social media platforms. You already had Peter Thiel, who is a Facebook founder. He's also a PayPal founder and many other important platforms in Silicon Valley. He was already part of the group, and I can't remember if he was in the steering committee at the time, but he would quickly become. They also had Chris Hughes of Facebook. Reportedly, Zuckerberg and his sister also showed up in helicopter there in St. Moritz, Switzerland, the other side of Switzerland than it's going to be this year. And Microsoft and, well, I guess we don't have to name them all, but Google has a very big presence at Bilderberg. And really, that's it. You've got 3 or 4 giants in the social media world, and that's the platform for everyone. So we think of free speech, we think of free expression, and Bilderberg themselves has upheld free expression and free speech, but that's not what we're actually getting when it comes to the digital world, because the people who control it are very much connected to the power structure. And when I say Bilderberg themselves has promoted transparency, before the participant list was published on the bilderbergmeetings.org site, a site that only came to exist because of activist pressure, you had Andrei Kudelski, who is the primary Swiss member of the steering committee for Bilderberg. He apparently set up this year's meeting. He spoke to the Swiss media, the French-speaking Swiss media, and gave kind of a detailed how he got into Bilderberg, what the group is about, and how, no, they're not really secret, they're just private. And he explicitly said his number one priority and the whole group was free expression, but they still can't tell you what goes on inside there.
Yeah, well, free expression, by that I think he means controlling the narrative, and that's probably what the weaponization of social media
Precisely
is all about. And I mean, literally, it was 4 months after the last Bilderberg conference that I was purged from Facebook. 350,000 followers just disappeared in the blink of an eye. Not soon after that, Alex Jones was the next one to fall. They all decided to just erase him from the internet, essentially, try to memory hole him. And then conservative voices started dropping left, right, and center. Guys like Yiannopoulos and McGuinness and Loomer and a whole bunch of them. Is it possible that this is the result of some of the topics discussed last year? And what does that mean for the future in terms of what we're going to be facing in the next 4 months from now?
The future looks gloomy, if not just challenging, for everyone's ability to have a free and independent media. I value the independence of our voices above even any of the numbers we're getting and the number of followers we might be reaching. The mainstream media is very dead and corpse-like and hollow, and because they're not telling the truth, and they're passing along a bunch of catchphrases and carefully set up narratives, just as you said. And the world is always going to need muckraking journalists and investigative journalists and opposition journalists and dissidents. That's the whole point of everything, really. So it's not about one platform or one person's voice or, this person went too far because they bordered on hate speech, et cetera. They're clamping down on the whole thing. And, well, we've seen that in many ways, but I really think it is fair to say if it didn't start in this group, this is very much a ground zero for the players who have been involved in it. And I say that from a perspective of studying the list every year for the past, I think it's been 13 years now. So on the other side of the coin, I've already just briefly mentioned the European elections, the move towards populism. Certainly a challenging situation for Bilderberg, or just part of the dialectic, order out of chaos, as they like to say, because the Bilderberg group has been pushing for the European Union and other global regional structures from a very, very early point from their founding. And that idea goes back actually before Bilderberg. Just for one example, I saw Julian Huxley, who was the founding director of UNESCO and the brother of the famous Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World. That Julian Huxley was talking about in 1941, when World War II was still quite fresh, how they were going to have to create some kind of European Union afterwards, and really talked about how it wasn't just the political structures or keeping Germany, the enemy of the Allies, in check. It was going to be restructuring the economy so that coal and steel and other sorts of raw materials would be controlled by a group of nations who are around the deposits and the areas where those moved and flowed into the economy. And that's really what happened. That's how the European Union started, with the coal and steel community, which does go back to Bilderberg agendas from the 50s onwards. And that evolved into the euro currency in the 1990s push for the formal union, calling it the European Union. Is very gradual and very thought out. And the third axis, of course, is the geopolitical axis. China and Russia are named. Last year, Iran and Saudi Arabia were named, and we did see a major provocation between those countries. And what I see as a likely push for war. I think we're all probably seeing that. And that first topic, a stable strategic order, is wide open for interpretation. I think the reason that's particularly of concern is because of the unprecedented members on this list. And I did a video calling it unprecedented last year because there were so many prime ministers, heads of states, presidents, or the top aides to those positions from many, many countries in Europe and several key people from the U.S. It's very much an Atlantic treaty type of situation. But this year, I think, is the first time you've got someone directly connected to a sitting U.S. president in the form of Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Trump, in office. We've had Bill Clinton go to the Bilderberg meeting, but he was a relatively unknown governor. He was a future president, and they're kingmakers of sorts. But this is a sitting president's, right arm man, or however you care to see him. But he's in the Middle East trying to cut some very important deals. And just the Israeli-Palestinian deal alone looks like a classic foible. It looks set up to fail and to further conflict in many ways. And again, Iran has already been put very much into perspective. And, the end game has been known for decades, but the hour does seem to be getting late. Now, Jared Kushner, as a direct corollary to the sitting President Trump, comes with Henry Kissinger, who normally I kind of glance over because he's there, I think, every single year. If he missed a year, it would have just been because he was ill or something, because he's been dedicated to this group his entire career. But it so happens that Henry Kissinger has been meeting with Trump. He's seen whatever this plan is that's unfolding that has a particular eye to the Middle East. I'm sure it does pertain to Russia and China as well, because they're very much key players in this. But they have been meeting in the last couple of days, possibly even today. And so in that sense, Henry Kissinger, now at 96 years old, is pretty much coming in tow with Jared Kushner. And there's one more name to mention there. It's not a name that's on the official member list, so I don't know if this person's actually attending. But the 24 hours, sorry, my French is not really terrific. It's the Swiss 24 hours news website where the Bilderberg report was first published. They have a little caption. It's not in their main story, but they have the little teaser caption to click on the story and read more. And it states, I have a screen capture here, that Mike Pompeo is supposedly attending, according to Andrei Kudelsky, who again set up this year's meeting. And he's, of course, the sitting Secretary of State. He was just also our CIA director before he moved up in the ranks. So again, very close to the Trump administration. They haven't even got a defense secretary right now. So If these are the events that are happening, if that's the type of world order we're talking, then these three individuals have a great deal of sway, and they come with two sitting National Security Council members, at least two people from the Pentagon / Secretary of Defense office. We got a former National Security Council member who did serve under Trump, and that's Nadia Shadlow. She was under McMaster. Of course, he had a brief reign, but he also came to Bilderberg. She's now on the steering committee, and so very influential. And then, just to add a little bit more to it, they are bringing to the table several key figures from intelligence, from the spy networks, including Jeremy Fleming, who's the current director of GCHQ in the UK, which, if you know the spy world and the communications tapping world, that's the center of everything, essentially. And you've also got John Sawers, the former MI6 chief, again from the UK, and he's on the steering committee as well. You've got the Danish Defense Intelligence guy, and don't forget David Petraeus was the head of the U.S. CIA. He left in a scandal, sure, but he came right into the arms of Bilderberg, and he got a cush job at KKR Global Institute, where he's involved in world affairs and very much tied to investment banking, hostile takeovers, and other big momentous things in the financial world. So there's a lot of key players in that, and that's just for starters.
Yeah, that's just scratching the surface. I mean, obviously, this is an incredibly powerful and influential organization. When you have these types of names, these types of influential people coming and meeting at the same time in secret under Chatham House rules, it can only leave one to speculate. But this is why we need to go to find out those discrepancies in the participants list. If indeed Pompeo is there, it would be good to have that on the record and documented. Which is why I go to these events, which is why you sometimes go to these events. In fact, you and I
covered
our first Bilderberg together 13 years ago in 2006. So it's been...
Yeah. We'll always have that. So yeah, that's where we met.
Yeah,
it's been
totally.
A long road since.
It's been a long, pretty wild ride since. Yeah.
Yeah, if they make it, if you're able to see the people coming in, because there's been years where they put up tarps and tents and screens and kept the protesters and the media back quite a distance. So we'll see what happens. On the other hand, people have to fly in. They have to come from somewhere, and they can't hide forever. So
yeah. Well, like you said, with the weaponization of social media and things of that nature on the agenda, I think it's incredibly important now more than ever for the independents to actually take the effort to get out there and to continue to cover this. That's why I just booked my flight, guys, literally an hour ago. I did this because it's very last minute, and I want to be there to document this, to bring you guys this information, and I really hope you'll help me do it. I've launched a GoFundMe campaign. This trip, it's going to be about 6 or 7 days. It's going to cost me a couple $1,000s, so I'm really hoping the PFT audience can pitch in and help us cover those costs, because I'm leaving tomorrow morning, and I want to provide the best possible coverage I can. So if you're interested in contributing, please check the links in the description below. So Aaron, I guess in closing, if you have any kind of final thoughts about this year's meeting, or what you expect to see coming out of this, or perhaps maybe some advice for people who are watching this, who are thinking, what's Bilderberg all about? Is this really something I should be concerned with here? Or is this just a conspiracy theory? Any final thoughts for people who are kind of on the fence about Bilderberg?
Well, to start with the last question first, I would advise people study the list from this year or any year and look at who these people are, look what they're involved in, and realize how powerful they are in the world structure, and come to your own conclusions. I'm not claiming to know what they're saying in private. I just understand, at least to a degree, what the consequences are of people of this position, through the years. As things happen of great importance in the world, they're traced back to these people. In fact, typically you'll find any number of these people making press statements, not on behalf of the Bilderberg Group, but on behalf of major announcements in the press surrounding the days of the meeting. And case in point, Theresa May is stepping down next week suddenly, a little bit unexpectedly, but that's a major shakeup in not only the UK itself, but the Brexit versus European, dynamic. And again, you have classic military-industrial complex people who are from defense, who are from heavy industry, aerospace, and whatnot. You've got Airbus company in there. You've got a French company that specializes in it's the Thales Group, actually, defense and transportation and aerospace. Those are people who do heavy lifting. They do the logistics of the world we live in. But you've also got pretty much the most powerful people from the tech world, and they just happen to be primarily based in the U.S. And even then primarily based at Silicon Valley. But between Eric Schmidt, who was executive of Google, who's now advising their umbrella company Alphabet, between Peter Thiel, who again set up PayPal and Facebook and any number of other important things, and Microsoft, Craig J. Moondy is on the steering committee, but they also have this year the CEO of Microsoft. He's there. It's these kind of important people that can't be ignored. And one more name I just want to discuss for a minute, Jared Cohen. Not a household name, but he's the founder and CEO of Jigsaw, a company that's under the Alphabet umbrella. Again, that's Google. They just changed their name because the alphabet is the building blocks of our language. It's the building blocks of our communication. So it's the building blocks of everything, and they want to be the providers of that. Jigsaw, invoking a puzzle, it's this company he's created to use technology as a disruptive force in geopolitics. And he set up before this company a think do tank, where they not only have ideas of what transitions they want in hostile countries and undesirable regimes, but ways to make it happen. So they actually tried to push an Iranian velvet revolution a few years ago through Twitter and Facebook and the social media. It didn't quite work, but it was a nice little jostle. And Jared Cohen, as part of these companies under the Google umbrella, was very much involved in the Arab Spring, and he had a crossover to the State Department, where he worked under the Bush administration and then under Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. And they're very much involved with this. He happens to be, by the way, the co-author of a book called The Digital Age with Eric Schmidt, the top guy at Google/Alphabet. So it's these kind of companies, and the world has changed. It's the smoky room was said to never exist. There's said to never be conspiracies, but that's simply something kind of shady done in the shadows by two or more parties. I mean, that's pretty much what a conspiracy is. And let's face it, we don't know the half of what's going on in this world. And it's a very small world at the top where people are making billions of dollars. They know each other. And quite frankly, I suspect they don't tolerate someone who's not going to go along with the program having that kind of money and clout.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be my statement.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I certainly don't want to go along with the program. That's why I want to get down there and expose this, for what it is, because as we said, it's of the utmost importance. So I want to encourage people to continue to follow your work, because I know over the next few days you're going to be continuing to follow this one as it develops, and maybe we can even have you on once more sometime in the next few days, or maybe after it's all done when we see what's come out of this once the dust settles. But where can people go to learn more from you as they want to track this one over the next few days?
So my wife, Melissa, and I do Truthstream Media, and primarily we're on YouTube. We also have the website truthstreammedia.com, and we just put out a documentary, The Minds of Men, that covers a lot of the history of MK Ultra and the nexus with neuroscience and science in general and mind control technology. It's a very real thing. It's historically documented and pretty incredible how far it goes. As far as you, I hope people will chip in and help you get there and back, because they didn't do you any favors waiting until the last minute. Last minute flights are always more expensive, and Switzerland's an expensive country, and frankly, they're counting on that. It's come out in past meetings. They don't like having protesters, and they're hoping to make it more expensive and more difficult to follow them. And there's just a couple dogged people like Dan Dix and maybe Luke who just keep following them around. I guess they know you guys by name by now, but
oh yeah,
I for one am glad to keep at it, and I'm going to be analyzing the list primarily and drawing what I can from that, and it'd be interesting to be on the ground too. So
yeah, no doubt. Awesome. Well, I'm sure we could have talked about this for hours. There's so much to unpack, but we'll leave it at there for today. The thing hasn't even started yet, so we'll leave it at that. So yes, please check the links in the description, guys, to the GoFundMe campaign if you want to contribute to my efforts to get out there and shine a light on the deeds that are done in the dark. Once again, Aaron Dykes, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks, Dan. Great to talk to you again.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.